This week on BSD Now, Allan is back from his UK trip, and we're going to get to hear his thoughts on the Developer Summit. That plus all the latest news and an interview with Drew talking about tutorial writing for FreeBSD. So keep it tuned to your place to be, SD. BSD Now, episode 156, the Fresh BSD Experience, recorded August 24th, 2016. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Allan Jude.
I'm glad to have you guys with us this week. We got an exciting episode. Of course, Allan, welcome back. When did you get back? You've been back?
Yeah, I got back Thursday late night.
So you're mostly over?
Yeah, well, I managed to sleep like 11 hours the night, but I don't know.
Okay.
Many people were complaining of allergies and stuff in Cambridge, and even I think George was like, I had my allergy shots this year and it's been fine except for here. I think it might have actually been something other than allergies going around. I have a little bit of it, mostly just sinus pressure and so on. Yeah.
Oh, yuck. Okay. Well, cool. We trust you're recovering
Working
quickly
on it.
Then. You have to tell us a little bit before we get into the show. How did the
Dev Summit went quite well. We had a record number of people showing up, which was good, but also it was a bit crowded in the main room. As with some other years, the biggest problem was trying to get people to break up into smaller groups. We pick a couple of topics and it's like, well, we don't want to put two really big topics opposite each other because, we need certain people to be in both sessions. So we have to schedule them not conflicting. But then it just meant there was always one big session with the majority of the people in it. And that meant that the air conditioning couldn't keep up. And there's only so much room for, at the table. And so some people are stuck sitting around the edge of the room with just a chair and so on. But we made do, and we had quite a few good sessions. The teaching breakout session went very well. Interesting stuff there. Quite a few other things we talked about. Some smaller group stuff happened, and they managed to work out a bunch of things.
Any hacking take place? Any of that?
No, we didn't do any Hacker Lounge. Some actual work did take place, yes. We did quite a bit of interesting things. I don't know that there were that many commits directly attributed to what happened at BSD Camp, but over the next couple of weeks, there's definitely quite a bit of stuff that at least got its start there that will land.
Sure. People get their inspiration and kind of the design.
Yeah, or just even
with other folks in person, and then go back.
Get the bit of information they needed to be able to go and finish it, and so on.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. Well, very cool. Yeah, I was very jealous. I will look forward to trying to make some time to do that next year.
Interestingly, it's next year we're actually looking at expanding it to 4 days instead of just 3, and trying to promote a bit more of the hackathon style. While it's good to do all the talking and the planning and so on, a number of the sessions it seemed like we didn't get as much accomplished as we had hoped, and a couple of them but we have a couple of these talklets, and while the goal is to keep them to about 5 minutes, some of them went a bit longer, and then there wasn't that much time for anything else after that.
Sure. Okay, well, cool. Well, it sounds good. So I guess they're going to be in the same venue next year?
Well, actually, it'll definitely be in Cambridge, but we might actually have it at a college instead of at the computer lab, where we'll actually have rooms big enough to have more people. Well,
if the AC was struggling and they're going to expand next year,
the downside is that the network is probably not as good at Random College rather than at the computer lab. But we'll see how that goes. The other hope is that have a few more of the sessions and groups kind of planned out ahead of time. In particular, if you know that this is going to be a subject, maybe you'll make some notes or do some work or just have done some background reading before you get there, so that that much more can happen, and we spend less time getting people up to speed and so on. But it should be good. Although a reminder, the next Dev Summit is coming up at for EuroBSDCon, and Benedict is organizing that, and he asked that anybody that wants to run a working group make sure they email devsummit@freebsd.org and get that in before September 3rd so that he can start organizing the Dev Summit that we have coming up just a month from now.
Sure. I should mention too, Meet BSD is coming up in November, and there's rumblings of a 2-day Dev Summit happening there. I guess the November 8th and 9th, the 2 days before the conference or no, 9th and 10th.
Yes, I was
fly out dates. So 9th and 10th, and then 11th and 12th.
Yeah, I was wondering if it was going to be before or after, because I think the other year it was after because Monday, Tuesday worked better for people, but
it sounds like it's going to be before.
Well, that's fine with me. I just need to know which one so I can get my flight sorted out.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, we haven't booked yet. We're going to start doing that soon now that we've heard it's going to be beforehand. So definitely looking forward to that one will be. Well. So if you can make it to either one of those, you will want to. Those Dev Summits. I enjoy the Dev Summits personally more than the conferences even. But
maybe it's just because it's the first 2 days, I think. Partly.
It might be. Like you're kind of the freshest at that point, and ready to do it. And by the third and fourth day, it's like, okay, we've heard this a couple times now.
Yeah.
But no, it's definitely a good experience. If you've not been to a Dev Summit, first of all, it's invite only. So you need to ask if you know somebody who's a FreeBSD committer, get them to sponsor you as a guest, and then you can go. But definitely worth your time.
Especially the Meet BSD one, because that one is part of it is it's a vendor summit, and because it's in California, there are that many more people that will come out. So there are a lot of companies using FreeBSD that will send a person or two to it, and sometimes that's the only way we ever find out that such and such a company uses BSD.
It's like, wait, what are you doing here? Oh yeah, we use BSD here. Oh,
it was the first event where Sony admitted to using FreeBSD, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, ABSD,
right? But still, like that's a good thing. So try and make it out to one of those. Again, Euro's coming up in about a month, and you're making that one.
Yes, I'll be there.
You're going. Oh wow! No, thank you. I will see you at Meet BSD though. I assume.
Yes, I'll be there as well.
Are you doing OpenZFS? You're going to do OpenZFS?
No, because it is the Monday and Tuesday directly after Euro. So Euro doesn't end until Sunday night. And literally OpenZFS starts that Monday morning. I really wish I could, but that's literally not possible.
Well, we would like you to be alive.
Well, even if I actually decided to try to get, if there was a flight at the right time to leave EuroBSDCon as soon as it was over or whatever, I literally, I don't think I could get to OpenZFS before the first day was over. And
that would be quite.
And OpenZFS is a 1-day conference followed by a 1-day hackathon, so. Yeah, but I know a bunch of other people are going to be there, and I'm hoping BSD will be well represented because the Linux people will have a larger showing this time. The keynote is from Canonical. Although, interestingly, hopefully, of interest to a bunch of the ZFS people is I saw John Baldwin got MDB, the Solaris debugger, ported to FreeBSD and doing its very first little bit of debugging.
Ooh, fancy. Okay, well, we'll have to cover that a little bit more.
You'll have to get that going a little further.
Info trickles out. Okay, well, that's good stuff. Well, thanks, Allan. We appreciate the status update on all those. And, of course, we'll look forward to seeing you guys at some of these events upcoming in the future. Make sure to come up and introduce yourself and say hi. We always like that. Let's get into the headlines for the week. A lot of stuff still happened while you're out of town. But first up, we have FreeBSD 11.0 RC1 is now available. Of course, they're marching onwards to 11.0, and RC1 is now out. But of course, in addition to the usual AMD 64 type architectures, you may want to give this a whirl on your various ARM boards. Yes. I kind of wanted to highlight this because I know we talk about it from time to time, but I don't think people always realize how many.
The first release that has all of these supported.
Yeah. People don't realize, FreeBSD can run on that. So without further ado, aside from the usual AMD 64, i386, of course, PowerPC and PowerPC 64, and yes, we still have a SPARC 64 image as well. There's a whole slew of ARM v6 boards. So we got Banana Pis, BeagleBones, QB boards, QB Board 2s, Qbox Hummingbird, a Gumstick, of course, Raspberry Pi B, Raspberry Pi 2, Panda board, Wand board, and a generic.
Yeah, so that's the ARM 64 or ARch 64 or whatever they decide to call it this week.
Whatever it ends up being. Right? But still, that's quite a slew of devices there. So if you have any of those and have been curious to try BSD out on an ARM platform, I think this may be the time to take the plunge here. Of course, if you run any problems, let them know as soon as possible so they can determine if that's something they need to get in before release. But I think at this point, we're pretty darn close. So for those who are wondering what actually changed between this and Beta 4, though, they did post that as well. It looks like null pointer dereference and IPsec has been fixed. They have removed support for SSH Protocol 1.
So that was
hopefully that doesn't
part of the
affect
update from OpenSSH.
Yep. Also, OpenSSH DSA keys have been disabled by default. So if you're still using a DSA key on a previous version of FreeBSD, you might want to rotate those to RSA keys or something else before upgrading to 11.0 RC1. Just a heads up. Let's see. PCIe hot plug on bridges with power controllers has been disabled. There's a new loader tunable to disable PCIe hot plug. Visa panic on suspend has been fixed. Google Compute Engine image publication has been fixed. There's an AES ICM heap corruption type bug they corrected, and a regression in pf.conf while parsing the interval keyword has been fixed, and also a ZFS VFS deadlock has been fixed. I think that's what held it up a little bit longer.
Yes.
Getting that
while building
out.
like Node.js, they found a ZFS rename race condition that was causing problems. Then
that was a good one to find.
And then since then, we normally would have had RC2 by now, but they found a problem with recent changes to the IPv6, where outbound UDP packets could be sent with the wrong MAC address because the way it... some caching was added to avoid having to look that up as often to increase performance, and it would sometimes have a stale entry from the last UDP packet or something, and would cause it to go out with the wrong MAC address. And a couple other problems in the V6 stack. Changes for that are being tested now, and they're looking.
The second one already is marked as fixed in the bug tracker, and I think the first one's still.
So those changes have been committed to head, and I think merged to the stable branch, and they're just being tested. And once they're confirmed by running in the FreeBSD cluster for a while without crashing anymore, then that will go forward, and we'll have RC2. And then as long as nobody finds any problems with that, then we'll probably have an RC3, and then we'll have the release, and that'll be it.
Cool. So coming soon, but definitely you should hop on board now. Usually the RCs are pretty solid, so give it a try. And you got to have people to test, otherwise.
Well, yes, in particular,
this is why dog fooding is so important.
So the release candidate, what that actually means is that if nobody reports any bugs, that'll be the release. So running that is definitely good support, and also it's updatable by FreeBSD update, so you can install RC2 or RC1 and then upgrade easily without issues. The big one there is that we need the testing, right? So
we do. We do. Especially for a .0. Especially for a .0. Okay, well, let's move on here to the next bit of news. So, of course, this is a good time if you're an ARM and BSD enthusiast. So in addition to all the ARM platforms we just mentioned for FreeBSD 11.0, we also now have word that initial support for Raspberry Pi 2 and Raspberry Pi 3 has started to land in OpenBSD. Looks like Mark Katinis has posted the following with a commit. He says, initial support for the Raspberry Pi 2 and 3. He said, all the hard work was done by Patrick. He said, I just cleaned things up a bit. Any bugs introduced in that process are entirely mine. He says, it doesn't work quite yet, but when it does, you'll need a recent firmware from the Raspberry Pi Foundation, their Git repository, and he provides the URL for that. He says, the device tree for Raspberry Pi is somewhat in flux as bits and pieces to support 2 and 3 are committed to the mainline Linux kernel as well. So this is, of course, exciting news. We'll keep you informed as to when we have images to play with. But running OpenBSD, maybe PF on a Raspberry Pi does sound intriguing. So I'll be curious to see what people come up with when that support fully gets fleshed out. Okay, so speaking of new stuff, we also have been tracking some of the graphics work. So, of course, you remember when FreeBSD lagged so far behind in graphics support? Well, the good news is those days are rapidly coming to an end. I suppose it is technically true now still because this hasn't landed in head yet, but soon. Well, those days are coming to an end. So Matt Macy, who we've interviewed month and a half ago now, a couple months ago, posted an update to the FreeBSD X11 list with news of his DRM branch being caught all the way up to Linux 4.8 RC2 now, which this is a huge accomplishment. And Matt comments even on this too. He says, at this moment, sysdev DRM in the DRM next tree is in sync with GitHub, Travalis, Linux upstream with the drivers, GPU, and DRM, although he says it's just for the subset of drivers that FreeBSD supports, so i915, Radeon, and AMD GPU. He says, I feel this is a bit of a milestone, as it means it is now possible that the future graphics support on FreeBSD could proceed in lockstep with Linux, which that's pretty darn cool. Now, as soon as you write a process to automate it where it pulls the commit in and puts it in our repo automatically, there's the next step, right? See if it passes build testing or whatever. But for those, of course, who want to try out the latest support, we have a link in the show notes here. You can build from his branch at his GitHub site, which is github.com/FreeBSD desktop, and then FreeBSD-based graphics. He has different branches for DRM Next, and I think different tags for 4.7, 4.8 RC2, etc. So that, of course, assumes you want to compile on it. With that, you'll need to grab, there's a ports tree with all the latest Xorg bits, and there's even a new one with Wayland support too, which I'm very intrigued. But that you'll have to compile all that from hand. So, of course, if compiling isn't your thing, I know we've kind of mentioned this. We haven't really gone into detail because there's going to be a fuller announcement pending here in the next month or so. But TrueOS, which is going to be the rebranded PCBSD, is going to be releasing a new ISO based on this update to Linux 4.7 in the next couple days. We have it internally here. We're just kind of beating it up a little bit. And then we're going to push that out here soon with 4.8 RC2 to follow in the next week or two. We're going to pull that in probably this weekend, start building it, test, see if anything breaks, and then push out an update with that as well. So you can also grab software that way and give it a whirl, see what works. I know on my latest X1 Carbon Skylake, it just kind of works. It's kind of nice. It's good stuff. Yep. But check that out. And we're even looking at pulling in the Wayland branch of ports now too, so we have those packages to play with just for the adventurous.
And I put, I guess it was the August 8th-ish, when it was the release of TrueOS on my X220, which is Sandy Bridge, and my T530, which is Ivy Bridge, and it's working fine on both of those. Because I know in the past, the X220 had some issues. Like Sandy Bridge, there were some regressions, but
sure,
it seems to be better now.
Seems pretty solid.
Awesome. I ran TrueOS on my laptop for all of BSD Cam. The wireless continued to work fine, which is interesting because I saw some other people were having trouble with certain IWNs, but the one in TrueOS was fine.
Well, it depends on which version of head they were running, because some stuff got fixed in the last month-ish. Because what I was seeing disconnects, and you'd have to restart the network a couple times too. But that seems to have been fixed in the last month in head, which we've pulled. So that's good. Did anybody ask you about it out there? Like, what is this?
Mostly the screensavers. There was an entire discussion of people being mesmerized when the Pong one came on, because it does a bunch of filtering to make it look like an old CRT screen. And we're like, I wonder how much work that is.
Right? Somebody spent a lot of time on this.
Well, because the one that got me the other day, I think I yelled at you on IRC about it, was... So I had it installing updates or whatever, and I left it on my desk and went downstairs to my work office and was doing some work. And I get a text message. It's like, why is your laptop doing the Star Wars scrolly thing? I'm like, what? He's like, you don't like Star Wars. I know. It's like, that must be that damn Chris infecting my machine.
Yeah, we're just trying to subvert you, Allan. Like, in your sleep, you're going to start seeing Star Wars.
Terribleness.
I think he has it set to random, though, right now, if I recall. But either way, still, it's exciting times. And like I said, stay tuned to the show. We'll talk a little bit more about TrueOS in the future. Right now, we're still kind of alpha-ish and just kind of beating it up, kicking the tires. And we're pushing things out so you can try stuff in the public. We have a website in the works and whatnot. So give us a little time. We'll talk about that more down the road. Yeah. Okay, so next up in the news here, we have installing FreeBSD for the Raspberry Pi. So this is actually something over at the FreeBSD Foundation site. And of course, a lot of people have been running FreeBSD on the various Raspberry Pi devices for a while now. I know I've done it for the last few months. I think I did it a year ago even when support initially landed. But there's still probably a lot of people out there who need a hand to get bootstrapped. Maybe this is a new thing for them. So the FreeBSD Foundation has put together a really nice tutorial which walks pretty much even the most novice user through getting FreeBSD up and running on a Raspberry Pi platform. So in particular, this is a really good way for students or other FreeBSD newcomers to try out the OS on a relatively low-cost platform outside of a VM. I know I had my son, that was his first FreeBSD install he did. Aside from a PCBSD, I had him deploy it on a little Raspberry Pi 2. And it worked, and he tried setting up a Minecraft server, and it was woefully under which, Minecraft's a little heavy.
Well,
but either way, he was able to do it.
The big one on the Raspberry Pi for Minecraft would be the disk I/O is so slow because of the SD card.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was, but the fact he was able to do it and figure it out was pretty cool. So, I mean, for what are they now? $30, $35? That's a really cheap way to give somebody a system they can essentially run a whole operating system on. So, it is pretty cool. Of course, the tutorial up at the Foundation site starts with a checklist of the items you're going to need to get started. So, at the moment, they recommend, of course, the Raspberry Pi 1, A or B, or the Raspberry Pi 2 hardware. For speed-wise, I'd, of course, recommend the 2. 3 is coming soon. But from there, they have instructions on how then you take the downloaded images, get them onto an SD card, including they have support on burning that from either a Mac or Windows, which they assume most newcomers would be doing. And really, with this done, it's just a matter of plugging the SD card into your device, powering it up, and then you end up at a login prompt with your new FreeBSD system ready to go. The most important detail at the end, though, is the default username and password, which is Raspberry for both. So make sure you remember that. Don't skim too quickly. I remember the first time I set up, I couldn't remember. I didn't know what the passwords were. I'm like, where do I go?
So on the default FreeBSD images, like that RC1 image we talked about at the top of the show, the username and password is noted in the release announcement there, and I think it's FreeBSD. Because they made it generic because that same image is, they make images for the Raspberry Pi, but also the BeagleBones and the Banana Pi.
You guys almost need like a first boot wizard like we have or something, and you boot up and it says, hey, welcome to your new system. Let's get started with a password.
Well, in particular, the reason it does the FreeBSD one is so that you can SSH in and not have to hook up the console at all.
Do they have SSH on?
On the FreeBSD ones, yes.
Okay, well, very cool. Yeah, that's one way to do it for sure. Okay, well, definitely check it out. Of course, if you have any of these Raspberry Pi boards hanging around, great tutorial. Again, maybe a good introduction to do something with one of your kids over the weekend. Great way to get them introduced to a platform. Plus, when they screw it up, no big deal. You can just reformat it and move on. So definitely recommend this article. Take a look when you get some free time. Okay, so we got an interview for this week.
Actually, it's with the person that wrote the tutorial we just talked about.
That's right. So we're going to be talking to Drew about that here in a little bit, so stay tuned for that. But before we get to it, we got to mention our first sponsor this week, which is going to be iX Systems. Of course, the website for that is ixsystems.com/BSDNow, where you want to go get in touch with those folks and let them build the next system of your dreams or whatever it is you need. We're talking little FreeNAS minis up to the Mini XL. They do FreeNAS certified, which are basically 1U or 2U or more systems with a lot of drives, or you go up to their TrueNAS product and then you got your enterprise level storage and HA, the whole 9 yards. But of course, all the iX gear, they can build servers, they can build mail servers, everything in between, all running the latest and greatest Intel processors. And of course, the best part is when you talk to these guys, they will help you out and they know the tech. Yep. So when you say, I'm going to be deploying Postgres, they're not going to be like, what's that? Or BSD. What's BSD? What's Linux? Like, they know these things. You just tell them what you want to do and let them help you figure out, like, oh, well, we have a lot of customers doing it this way with this type of hardware. Like, if you want the best performance, this is where you want to, put your money and whatnot. And it's amazing that they have kind of sales engineers who can do that.
Well, it's just, again, the white glove support. So we were working yesterday, and I get the alert from Nagios, hey, one of the hard drives in one of those iX boxes we bought in the spring has failed. And I'm like, oh. So, I grabbed the serial number, and I head over to the iX support site, and I'm like, here's the serial, here's the error message, the smart output. Yep, this one, smart actually says failed rather than pass with like unreadable sectors or something. This drive is definitely dead. Give them the information. Send that off, and shortly thereafter, it's like, all right, here's the FedEx tracking number for your new drive that's on the way, and we've included a return shipping label for the dead drive, and here's the tracking number for that, that drive is already halfway here. and should probably be here tomorrow.
Fantastic.
And we get that swapped out and send the bad one back, and it'll be all sorted. It's just they make it so painless. In this particular one, it's fine because the server's local. But I've had them do the same thing where the server is in a data center in not the same country as me, and they understand that and actually can ship directly to that data center. And right in the RMA information, they actually have the spot where I can write the extra information I need them to put on the box, so that when it gets to the data center techs know what it's for, which customer it's for, what to do with it, and all that information, so that they can actually swap it in for me and deal with all the complexity. And they definitely understand this stuff because they've been around so long and been doing the company was started by sysadmins, which is what really makes a difference. They're like, we've operated servers for so long and we've never found a hardware supplier that actually, did it the way we would want it done. And now IX is, and every time it comes up, I'm just so glad that I'm using them.
Well, definitely. And you can do that too. Again, real simple, ixsystems.com/BSDNow. Go there, and when you're talking to sales engineers, tell them you heard about it here on BSD Now, because they love hearing from our listeners. And, that's just a good way to start the conversation with them. And, of course, from there, they'll help you build whatever the system is you need. And if you do something crazy or exotic, though, you have to let me know, because we like seeing those and sharing those with you guys out in the audience. It's always fun to see wild hardware spotted out in the field. It's pretty cool. But again, go ahead and get in touch with those folks and let them know that we sent you. Okay, we're joined today by Drew Gurkowski, who's a FreeBSD Foundation intern, who's here to talk to us about being a first-time user and, of course, writing tutorials to go with. So, first of all, thank you so much for coming on the show today, Drew. We appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Great. So, of course, all the first-timers, we got to do this. We got to ask you, how did you first hear about FreeBSD?
So my mom actually works at the FreeBSD Foundation.
Okay, that works.
Yeah, they were looking for an intern for the summer, and I was coming back from college, so it actually lined up really well, and I was able to work on FreeBSD while I was home. Yeah.
Cool. So had you ever used a Unix-like operating system, like Linux or something, before you got introduced to FreeBSD?
No, actually, I came into this as... I've used Windows and I've used OS X before. I've never used any other operating system. So it was really cool to kind of experience that, to have your own unique... For me, it felt like creating my own operating system. I know it's set up, but the fact that I could create a desktop environment for myself, I could choose which apps to install. It was a really interesting and cool thing. So I'd never worked with it before, but I'm glad I did.
Oh, that's neat. So I guess what kind of surprised you or jumped out at you the most about FreeBSD when you were getting started?
I would say the sheer number of ports and packages that are available, because I remember I first went to the ports page and I was just trying to look for one thing. I was looking for a desktop environment, and I got lost. There was so much stuff. I was like, this is awesome. I get to try all this stuff. So there's definitely a couple of days where I was just experimenting with cool stuff.
Well, yeah, I guess even
really...
Go ahead.
Yeah. Keep going. Sorry.
Just even for desktop environments, there's more than 100 to pick from.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
Really awesome.
Some are scarier than others too, but there's some good ones in there.
Yeah, there's some that were just like a page of a couple buttons. I was like, okay, I want a little bit more than this, and some were quite immersive. It was really cool.
I forget which one it was. It's been so long. When we were doing all of them for PCBSD, there was one of them where to do a config, you had to compile the config. It was and I forget what it was. It didn't just support editing a file. Oh, no, you had to compile the config in. That was weird to set up. Somebody right now out there is like, oh, I use that one. That's awesome. And I'm like, no.
Didn't stumble across that one.
Yeah. Cool.
So what would you say was the hardest part about getting started using FreeBSD, having no experience with it before?
Yeah, having no experience with it, just... ultimately basic commands that most people have experience with. That was the hardest part. And a lot of the documentation that was aimed for newbies was quite out of date. There was one, I remember on the first page, it was the newbies page. I was directed to it. It was the splash page for me to go to. And it was talking about, I think, point-to-point protocol. And it was listed as like a step I needed to take. So I went through like all the process, and I was like, wait, I don't have dial up. So there was a little bit of stuff that for like newbies entering it for the first time was a little outdated.
Well, the PPP is still used for DSL.
Yes.
But
yes.
Yeah, maybe that's not the first step.
It's for new users who are just like, what's FreeBSD?
Yeah.
It's not like the first thing that you want to know.
Yeah.
Like the handbook, I think, would be of better use in that instance.
Well, and I guess the other thing is that nowadays most people don't connect their computer directly to the internet. They have a router or something, and so they don't have to think about the PPPoE and so on. So yeah, that's probably a good place to clean up a little bit.
Yeah, and we actually got a chance to clean it up. And so the newbies page has actually been completely written. And so it's much more helpful now, I hope.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, tell us a little bit about the tutorials you've been writing. So which ones have you actually created?
Yeah, so I've created a few now. I've created installing FreeBSD so on a virtual machine. So using VirtualBox. So if you have a Mac, Windows, Linux, you can set up a virtual machine with it. So that was the first one I did. And then how to set up PCBSD and FreeBSD as a primary operating system. I just wrote one about setting it up on a Raspberry Pi.
Nice.
And then one that I'm currently working on and should be done very soon is one of the things I actually struggled with right away was basic commands for Unix systems and FreeBSD. So I wrote one with basically all the commands that you need to get introduced to FreeBSD, not the complex commands and such, but just the basics.
Very nice. So no crazy like gpart commands or anything like that. More of like, this is how you change to a directory. This is how you view what's in the directory.
Exactly. How to edit files, how to change your video settings, just the most basic commands.
Oh, now I got to ask you, what are you using for editing files?
I'm using VI.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I used Easy
Plus
Edit
one,
first.
man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Somebody has raised you right.
Well, you know how the joke goes, right? I started using VI 20 years ago. I've never yet figured out how to exit.
Right.
Yeah, I think I stumbled across VI because I remember I was going through installing, I think it was X Windows, and I was installing it for the first time. So, and it was like edit your conf file. And I just had no idea how to do it at all.
Sure.
So I went to a third-party like blog, and they were talking about the VI command. So I found out through that. It's nice. I like it a lot.
Very cool. Yeah, once you go VI, you don't really go back.
Yeah.
So many options.
But, as the first-time user, you open up VI, and you type, and nothing happens. And you're like, what is this?
Yeah, that is a little confusing.
And you try to use delete to like backspace, and you're just like, why is this not working?
Yeah.
Why is it deleting my entire line? What's going on here?
Yeah, and then you finish the editing, and you're like, okay, how do I quit? And how do I save?
This is very interesting. What now?
So yeah, there's some advantage to easy edit for when you're first getting started, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that once you know VI and you know how to enter text, delete text, and save changes, I think that's all you need to use VI better than easy edit.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you were writing the tutorials, how did you approach the new concepts and tools? Like, how did you kind of fill in the gaps of what people needed to know before they could get to that point?
Well, I definitely relied heavily on documentation. The great thing about like what I encountered with FreeBSD is that there's a ridiculous amount of documentation. So if I stumbled across a problem or like an issue I had personally, there's always like I could check the handbook, I could check third-party blogs, I could check the websites. So there was always content available to solve issues I ran into. It was just a question of finding it and compiling it in one place.
Yeah. So do you think there's something we could do to make it easier to find it and to organize it in a way where you can actually, the handbook is huge and it's organized into chapters, but is it really organized in the way that makes it easiest for someone who's just getting started to find what they're looking for?
I think the handbook was really good. That was the least of the problems I had. I feel like it could be reorganized in a couple of ways, mostly with a lot of the new options for FreeBSD, like virtual machines, are organized way in the end. If you're a new user, you might not stumble across it. I know there's some really important information on drivers for VirtualBox that I stumbled on like a week after I had set it up. So I'd had some issues with graphics and stuff until I found that. I think the big thing that would be nice is a lot of the times the consistency between sources isn't the same. So like if I stumble across something in the handbook, this was really big when I was setting up Wi-Fi because I had a hidden Wi-Fi server. So the handbook said one thing, the official website said another thing, and I eventually got the correct answer from two different blogs that kind of contradicted each other.
Sure.
So like I guess the big thing is like making sure that all sources of the official ones, I know we can't control like third-party blogs, but making sure that all the sources that are official, documentation have the same information. So you're not lost when you stumble across something that says exactly the opposite of what you found earlier.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing is making sure that everything that people are going to be looking for is documented in the handbook so that they don't have to go look for third-party blogs where they will find two different ones that contradict each other and not know how to get started. Or worse, especially when you're very new to it, you accidentally pull up a blog that's actually talking about Linux and it's just completely something else and doesn't work.
It's true.
Well, their shell prompt looks funny or something. So when you started going through the FreeBSD documentation, what would you say maybe were the best aspects of it? And then on the flip side, what about maybe the worst aspects, the things you had trouble with?
Yeah, so the sheer amount of documentation, it was probably the best part because the handbook is this literal beast of a document. It has, so much information, and I think that's part of the worst thing about it as well. I think that there's such a wealth of documentation information available that a lot of it is hard to update, and a lot of it is, so you stumble across things where you find some great information and then like one point is out of date. And I think that's because there's so much that keeping everything up to date is a little problem. I don't know if there's a really great way to solve that, but yeah, keeping things consistent between sources would be my suggestion. And there is a lot of information. So even when I did stumble across a problem, I was able to fix it eventually, whether from the handbook or somewhere else.
I think there's two different things there. One that we talked about at BSD Cam last week was having a reviewed by for each section so that we know the last time we've actually worked on a particular section. So it's easier to figure out which ones are, had been gone quite a while without being updated. So it's easier to find those.
Be up at the top like a blog post, like last edited, boom.
Right. Well, that maybe for the user, but I mean, just mean internal into the doc, knowing for each subsection when the last time somebody actually worked on it and made sure it was right is, so it's easy to identify, the thing that hasn't been updated in 3 years is this one. Let's look at that and so on. Like, especially, the handbook got cleaned up quite a bit when Drew went through it when they were going to do a print version of the handbook, which would have been like 2 entire textbooks.
Wow.
And they trimmed a lot of old stuff, like setting up, dot matrix printers and a couple of things that probably just didn't make any sense. But I think the other problem is that oftentimes, there is a handbook section on what you're trying to do, but it's just this wall of text. And it's just like, that's too much information at once. And so a project the Docs team has been working on, but obviously is always understaffed for that, is having each section of the handbook have a quick start section, which just has, in less than a screen full, just the answers you need to get it, how to connect to your Wi-Fi. And then maybe, if you have a hidden Wi-Fi point, you need to read this bigger section down here, but just the basics on how to get through the thing you want are very first part of each chapter, and you only have to dive into the whole chapter if you need more information.
Doing something maybe non-standard or
right, just to avoid your eyes glazing over it, right? You get that too long, didn't read.
We should do that. We should have an eye roll rating for each site. Yeah, where you see how much this makes the eyes roll into the back of your head, and we rate pages based on that, determining which one should be rewritten.
Yeah,
be good.
So I guess the other thing is, so did you make changes to documentation?
Yeah, so there's I've been working with the FreeBSD Foundation this entire time, and the great thing was I was able to work with people who had commit bits. So I brought issues up with documentation that I found, and they were able to change it. Like I said, the newbies page was completely revamped. Very little of the original remains because we really went through and rewrote it a lot. So yeah, it's been great to be able to have people who I stumble across a problem, I bring it up to their attention, and the next.
Yeah, there he goes.
That's the last part of what you were saying there.
Yeah.
Oh, you lost last.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
When you slammed the table, your Skype froze.
my Skype froze. Okay. Something. Where did you lose it?
You had a committer, and so when you made a change, they would, or when you suggested a change, they'd make a change the next day?
Oh, yeah. That was basically the end.
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't really say anything.
Yep. So, like, were you editing in the docbook format, or just sending them plain text, or?
We would actually be in like the same room, so what we did was like a little hackathon. So I didn't see how they were editing it per se, but I would give them suggestions, and they would just enter it. I would see the results and see if I liked it or not, and so we worked that way.
Yeah,
pretty cool.
One of the ideas we had at BSD Cam was using an annotation system. So actually, like while you're viewing the handbook, you could just click a little tool that is up in the corner of your browser, or whatever, and start suggesting changes while you were reading it, and then have those sent off, and basically have someone who doesn't have to be in the room with you apply those changes. Do you think that'd be useful?
That would be really cool. I know with the Bugzilla, you can report on documentation, and that is kind of hard because you have to be like, in this section where it says this. So annotation would be really nice because you would just be able to link to it. The person would see what you're commenting on and to where the issue you had was.
Yeah, because it kind of preserves the context that way.
Yeah.
Because the other problem with when people report things in Bugzilla is, even if you use like the chapter.section number, if somebody adds a new chapter or something, it rearranges all those numbers, and all of a sudden it's not pointing to the same thing anymore.
Sure.
I found that a couple times when people was like,
That's
in this
how it was
section.
a week ago.
Yeah. So what best practices would you like to see implemented for documenting, and even just tutorial writings, maybe for not necessarily even things on the official website, but things that other people do?
If when it's geared at newbies, mostly, making sure that everything is very much defined, because I know a lot of the people who write the documentation obviously have a lot of experience with FreeBSD. So one thing that I ran into a lot was acronyms that I wouldn't quite understand. So things that I would have to, just like if there's an acronym, define it first. If there's something that's important to understand, making sure to approach it from, maybe this person has never dealt with an operating system before, installing it themselves. That's more like for the newbies. And then, if you have two different pages that say something such as like the download page, and then the handbook where it talks about how to download, making sure that the information on both is the same, so they correlate, and it doesn't cause issues when people run into contradictions.
Yep. Sure. There's quite a few things we could try to do better there. But the biggest one, obviously, is the longer you've been doing it, the more things you forget that a new person won't know. Or even just the other problem is just the age gap. The average age of a FreeBSD developer is like 36. So what we knew about computers when we were 20 is a lot different than what college students have now. I don't know that. But we had experience. A lot of people who are on FreeBSD now at that age started using DOS, and so have some basic concept of how command line stuff works. Whereas most students now probably don't have that same background of just the concept of, this is the command, these are the switches, and these are the arguments, and that's how you write a command line.
Like a lot of kids grow up just using a tablet now.
Yeah.
They're like, I got to use a keyboard.
Well, when I was teaching, I used to say the same thing. It was like, when I was a kid, I got a computer when I was like 12, and I wanted to tear it apart and put it back together and know everything about it. But, the TV was just something you turn on, you'd watch it, and then you turn it off. Nowadays, that's how computers are for most people, right? You turn it on, entertainment comes out, and then you turn it off. Mm-hmm. You don't care about what's inside of it. Whereas, when I first got my computer, it's like, no, I want to tear it apart and put it back together every time.
Yeah, definitely different attitudes with age and ways we approach computers.
Yeah, so even then, it's harder to, the longer you've been doing it, it's harder to write documentation for newbies, and that's why I think it's really helpful to have someone with a completely fresh perspective like you come in and give us a hand there.
Nice. Mm-hmm. Well, how would you say what your experience was maybe overall using FreeBSD? And the big question is, do you plan on keep using it in the future?
Yeah, so like I said, I've only ever used, pre-installed operating systems, so Windows and Mac OS before. So I had a great time because, like I said earlier, the ability to customize it and make it my own and have a wealth of options to use was really interesting. I now have a computer with FreeBSD on it, so I definitely hope to use it in the future for whatever things I have. I know it's great for like setting up servers and other things, so if I needed operating system, I know I have FreeBSD as an option now.
Cool.
Yeah.
So did you get much of a chance to interact with the rest of the community during the journey, or was it just working with some of the committers you already knew?
So mostly with the committers I knew. There's a new user group that we just set up in Boulder. Mm-hmm. I know there was one before, but I think it shut down for a little while, and they just restarted it. I know I worked with, I submitted bugs through Bugzilla, so I got to talk to some committers through there, in the forums a bit. Mm-hmm. I didn't really start many threads, but I was able to read through them, and it's not really interacting with them, but seeing what they wrote at the time. So not a huge amount, but I did get to read the work of a lot of committers and talk to a few. Yeah.
Cool. Any future tutorials or projects using FreeBSD on the horizon? What do they got you doing next?
Yeah, so I have a really cool one coming up. I'm kind of following using FreeBSD on a Raspberry Pi. So what I'm doing is I'm setting up a robot controlled by, right now I have it set up on a mouse, but I'm hoping to use it with like a game controller, using FreeBSD as the operating system on a Raspberry Pi for a really low cost robot, which I think
you're going to blog this and document it and be able to talk about it on the show? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be neat. We'll definitely talk about that when you show us some pictures. That'll be neat.
Definitely.
Awesome. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
Not really. Just that if anyone's watching who hasn't taken the jump into FreeBSD because they are not experienced with this kind of operating system, that try it. Worst case, you waste 20 minutes of your day. In best case, you discover an operating system that really works for you, and you could definitely use a lot. Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Hey, we appreciate you spending some time with us today and telling us about it, and we wish you luck on the rest of your BSD journey. May it be long and fruitful.
All right, thank you guys so much for having me.
Okay, we're back. Hope you guys enjoyed the interview. Thanks, Drew, for taking the time to do that with us. We appreciate it. So, of course, we're going to get into the news roundup, but really quick before we do that, our second sponsor this week is going to be DigitalOcean. Of course, the website for that is digitalocean.com. So you want to go there, get signed up, create your account right now. And when you do that, go ahead and insert the coupon code FreeBSDNow, which is good for a $10 credit, which will let you basically run 2 months of a VM, their lower end one there. At no cost. How cool is that? 2 months to play with it and try it before you buy it. That's pretty stinking cool. So definitely give that a whirl. Of course, FreeBSD is supported natively there, but you can do other things like load OpenBSD, Net, Dragonfly. They also offer Linux. So, hey, maybe you need a Linux so you can investigate something. Not telling you should run it or anything, but they do have that up in the cloud there, which is really cool. So, of course, check that out today. And if you speak to anyone, tell them you heard about it here on BSD Now. But we encourage you. There's a lot of data centers. They're all over the world, SSD backed. And we've talked about just all the neat things they offer. Of course, private IPs that are floating IPs between different VMs. So that's pretty stinking cool. And I guess now the new block storage is a thing too. So you'll want to give that a whirl. But anyway, check them out today. And of course, if you have any problems, let them know and tell them you heard about it here, because they like to hear from our listeners as well. Anything else you want to add on that one, Allan? Or
right.
Head into the news roundup?
Pay attention slightly later in the episode when we'll talk about some other interesting things you can do with DigitalOcean and ZFS. We
do have something coming soon, so stay tuned for that. Okay, so first up in the news roundup, we have FreeBSD's IPFWs getting a NAT64 implementation.
Yes, this is a big one.
Tell us, what are they doing there?
Yeah, so this is IPFW2, which is the native firewall in FreeBSD. It was rewritten last in FreeBSD 5. Sorry. Anyway, so it's a new loadable module that will provide stateless and stateful NAT64. So stateless translation of NAT64 is used when you have a translator that sits in front of IPv-only servers to allow them to be reached by remote IPv6-only clients. So if you run this in the stateless mode, it's basically you put this firewall in front of a bunch of servers that only speak v4, and it allows v6 clients to get to them. Right? And then there's stateful mode, which is basically what you're normally used think about when you think about NAT. With that one, it's suitable for deployments where the client side or a service provider, which allows IPv6 only clients to reach out to the legacy IPv4 only internet. So if you set up this IPv6 or this NAT64 on your router, it means all the machines on your LAN can have IPv6. And if they're trying to get to some website that only has IPv4, then it will do translation. And basically, you give a small pool of IPv4 addresses to the router, and all your clients are v6 only. And then as they go out, they get assigned a spot on, a port on one of those IPv4 addresses, and it goes there.
That's really interesting.
This is how a lot of phones work, right? There are so many cell phones now, there's not enough IP addresses. Right? So cell phone companies will give IPv6 only addresses to most phones, and then have NAT64 to connect them out to the internet. Some phone companies still do an IPv4, you'll have an internal 10 whatever IP, and it goes through regular NAT. But a lot of them are going to v6 only, and so this NAT64 is quite interesting. But it's also interesting from the other side, where if you have some older appliances or something that are v4 only, you can put one of these stateless NAT64s in front of it, and basically give those machines an IPv6 address, and this machine will translate it to v4 for them that way as well. So it actually works in two different directions.
I assume PF and FreeBSD have anything similar to this?
So PF on OpenBSD, I think, has something almost. I don't know. I've never used it. But on FreeBSD, there isn't one committed yet. I think there's somebody's got one up in a review or something. But this is interesting to have it in IPFW. And I know there's work started in Dragonfly on what they call IPFW3, where they actually are getting towards having something like PF sync to sync the state table between two firewalls. If that were to get integrated as well, then and could do the NAT rules and NAT64 rules, as it turns out, with all of that, it might be interesting that IPFW would actually be in a better position than PF.
They might just steal me back to running IPFW on my firewall at the house. So we did for a while, and then we're on PF now, but this may make me go back.
Yeah, well, the only reason I've been using PF is that it's easier to manage a large number of NAT rules than with IPFW. So I'm looking at, in the back of my mind, I'd like to fix that user experience in IPFW as well, so that all your NAT rules didn't have to go on one big rule. You could actually just have multiple rules. But yeah.
Yeah, my thing was there was only a UPnP port for PF that worked, right? And unfortunately, enough of my kids play games.
Yes,
and,
too many consoles.
Consoles required UPnP, blah, 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 because I would prefer not to use it at all. But is path of least resistance. Anyway, well, that's cool. I'm going to keep an eye on that. That is really intriguing. I
Yes.
like the idea of running like an IPv6 native network at the house.
Well, in particular, this is of interest to the FreeBSD cluster team because we have a whole lot of service jails for things like, Bugzilla, Fabricator, or even just the package builders, and not enough IP addresses. So a lot of those jails are v6 only, and it causes problems when they need to say go to GitHub, which is v4 only. If we could have NAT64 set up, then all those machines would be able to share a small pool of v4 addresses and have access to everything. And this would solve quite a few problems.
Now, if only my upstream provider would provide v6 natively, so I didn't have to.
Yep. There's example configurations for both stateful and stateless in the commit message. Hopefully maybe some user who maybe watches the show out there will be interested in setting this up and do so, and then write up some more concrete steps and actually make a FreeBSD handbook chapter on using NAT64. That would be quite nice to have.
Fantastic.
And this work was sponsored by Yandex, which is a Russian search engine, has been a long, long time FreeBSD user. I think they were instrumental in making FreeBSD the original platform that all Nginx development happened on.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. We'll, of course, keep an eye on that. I hope some docs and tutorials show up kind of wrapped around that. Although the commit message has good examples as well.
Just
hopefully that's enough of a springboard for someone.
Yeah, that should be enough to get you going, but it'd be nice to see slightly more detailed thing for the handbook. But, at this point, the code is only 10 days old.
Sure.
Well, I guess it's been in use at Yandex for a while, but it's only been committed for 10 days.
Yep. Okay, so next up we have an update from Ed Mast. He's written a lengthy update on the progress being made towards using LLVM's LLD linker as a replacement for GNU's LD. So he starts off by giving us some of the potential benefits of switching using LLD versus LD version 2.17.50 that FreeBSD currently uses. So among some of the notables, he mentions, of course, AArch64, which is ARM64 support. Link time optimization, or LTO, new ABI support, other linker optimizations, much faster link times, and of course a maintained code base. And of course those all sound great, but he also gives us an update on several of the major blockers. He says since last March, the last update they did, several LLD developers have implemented much of the missing functionality that was blocking. The main blockers were symbol version support and expression evaluation in the linker script expression parser. He says both of those are now nearly complete. That sounds good. All the major blockers are getting cleared out. He also articulated a very detailed plan with how they're considering switching over. So I guess they're looking at starting with updating LLD along with Kling's LLVM 3.9 update that DimEd is working on. Also adding the bmake build infrastructure and installing it as user bin ld.lld on the same architecture that uses Kling currently. So AMD 64, ARM, ARM64, i386. He says, I don't think there's a need for a with LLD SRC knob, but he'll add one if anybody needs it. And then next is update LLDB again, which most likely will be a snapshot from an upstream SVN. And once it is able to link an unmodified FreeBSD kernel, of course. And then at that point, modifying the bootloader and kernel builds to avoid using any features that are not implemented by LLD. I'm not sure how many of those still exist, probably a couple. And he said also introduce a with LLD as LD knob so that you can have a user bin LD actually be a hard link to ld.lld.
Yes.
There's a lot of LDs mixed in here as opposed to a user bin ld.bf.
Yeah, who's going to debug ld.lld with LLDB?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's getting confusing, guys. Come on, come up with some new acronyms. Anyway, at that point, they'll request ports EXP runs and issue a call for testing with third parties software, and of course, fix any issues they find during that process. And then at that point, they'll switch to it by default in head for any Kling using architectures, and they'll add a knob for without LLD as LD knob to switch back to GNU LD. So if you still want to go back to the old one, you can. But very interesting. I assume this will land sometime during the 12 head life cycle.
Yeah,
sounds like it's getting close enough. We should see it hit here.
At BSD Cam, it compiled the FreeBSD kernel successfully in such a way that it actually booted. That was a big milestone. So, I expect that to land relatively soon.
That's great. That's great. Well, hopefully we'll be seeing that here in the near future. Okay, so we kind of teased on this next one here, but we were talking about DigitalOcean. And so we actually, we've talked about in the past how DigitalOcean supports ZFS, and that's totally doable. But today we actually have a really nice how-to written by Kaspers Mikovics, or FXLV on GitHub, which you'll want to check this out. But before getting started, Kaspers mentioned some of the pre-requirements. So first of all, he recommends you start with a minimum of 2 gigs of memory, which is the $20 a month droplet. So he said this is to ensure you have plenty of cushion to avoid running out of memory during the process. Of course, we've talked about this in the past. It's possible to use ZFS with less, but depending on your workload, this is a pretty reasonable, pretty sane default.
It really depends on your working set. That's how much data you actually have floating around in memory at a time. To use less than 2 gigabytes, you really have to be willing to do some extra tuning and so on.
Sure. Doable, but not for maybe not for the faint-hearted. But from there, he talks about checking out MFS BSD. That's discussed, along with details on how to make it suitable for a DigitalOcean installation, which in this case mostly just involves disabling DHCP for the network device. And for good measure, they add package static as well, so you're already bootstrapped and ready to go. But with that done, he's going to use MFS BSD to create a tar file. And then at that point, you just extract it on top of your running system. Just splat it right over. Don't worry, we're going to get rid of the whole thing anyway here in a second. But after you reboot, you'll be able to boot up into the MFS BSD and run BSD install pretty much normally and just go ahead and install and format the disk with ZFS as normal. And at the end of the day, you end up with a brand new, fresh FreeBSD on ZFS installation done just like you did it on bare hardware back home. So definitely a good thing, a very good tutorial, something I may need to do in the near future to my DigitalOcean droplets. It might be time to upgrade.
Yes, although you can, I think since it's been published, you can actually just spin up a 10.3 FreeBSD droplet that's already ZFS by the DigitalOcean people. But this really gives you the flexibility to set it up the way you want, which is quite nice.
Yeah, you can just exactly the way you want, like it's a fresh install, and not have to worry about changing things that maybe they've already done. But definitely a good option. It's neat they let you do this.
The really scary one, though, is I've done this on a remote Linux server to convert it to FreeBSD, where you didn't have console access. So the nice thing about DigitalOcean is you have that HTML5 console, so you can log in as root at the console and easily do this stuff. But I've had remote Linux servers where I didn't have the ability to get to the console. All I had was SSH. And so, putting MFS BSD into the disabled swap partition and making the system boot from that and have MFS BSD come up with the right IP address and set up so I can SSH into it and then run BSD install to the disk was especially interesting. But this is also pushing the other interesting thing we're looking at is we want to do to hook MFS BSD up to the FreeBSD release process so it's built automatically. And Martin does a good job of building it for the releases. This will also mean that the weekly snapshots of head will have an MFS BSD image, which will be quite interesting as well.
Oh, that's very cool. Very cool. See, there's so much good, exciting stuff happening right now. This is a good time to be a BSD user in general. I remember the dark days. What was it? The 5.x series? Yeah, there was some bumps in the road, but
it's interesting. I've been a part of the community for I've been a user for more than 10 years now, but I became part of the community around 2012, and it just seems like everything's getting more and more exciting as it goes. I kind of thought once I got into it, it's like, oh, there's not that much happening, and I remember a couple of weeks before we started the first BSD Now, when the idea was brought up, it's like, there's not possibly going to be enough new stuff happening every week to talk about it. Now it's like, we're having a lot of difficulty keeping the show under an hour.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, if we really wanted to get strict about it, we could cut the show down to an hour and then do multiple episodes a week. But no, me and Allan don't have time for that.
It's hard enough as it is.
Yeah, but it is theoretically possible. There's definitely a lot of content out there.
Okay, so the next story.
Speaking of content, so here's something else, again, just another thing where stuff's happening. But, oh, great. Now our producer's saying, yes, that's what he wants us to do. Nate, you do it.
So, yes, a user has managed to get OpenBSD and FreeBSD working with LibreBoot, which is basically a replacement for the proprietary BIOS for your machine, which is quite interesting. So this is in a short drive-by post on the LibreBoot mailing list. Piotr Kubjaj gave a quick note that he has managed to run both OpenBSD and FreeBSD. He says, I know GNU people don't like BSD, so let me make it quick, but he succeeded in booting FreeBSD 11.0 RC1 using the text mode on his Lenovo X200 with the latest version of LibreBoot. To get the installer to boot, he used KFreeBSD and then USB 0 GPT-3. So it looks like that's very grub-like syntax.
That's what I'm wondering. Like, I haven't actually looked at the LibreBoot internals, but that looks identical to Grub. Like, I wonder if they use Grub somewhere in this process.
And so, yes, you would boot it the same way you would boot FreeBSD from Grub. And so that's quite good because it means that it's easy to, something everybody already knows and that there's existing configuration for. And then it's very similar except for OpenBSD to load the OpenBSD initramfs and so on.
So now somebody actually needs to try installing it, though. I guess he just booted the installers, but we need to see if any other issues crop up once people actually try running this. So
yes, so
still, this
I've been
good first step.
I'm interested in a couple of things. Is could the Grub be replaced with the BSD style bootloader?
Yes,
but I'm not too concerned about that. More concerned is, how do I actually get LibreBoot onto one of my X220s? Every time I've looked at something like this, like Core Boot or LibreBoot stuff, it involved connecting a bunch of wires and having a special tool, and it's like, ah.
Yeah. Every time I'm like, oh, this sounds neat, and then I look at it, I'm like, that's scary. Like, I don't want to do that to my laptop, because I think the potential for bricking things is there possibly. So that would definitely put a crimp in my weekend. But anyway, if anybody else is eager and adventurous, give this a shot. See if you can actually get it installed, and then either send something back to the mailing list there or let us know. We'd be curious to hear about that. I think it is fascinating, the idea of having a truly open source BIOS. Sounds good. Okay, folks, so we got feedback and questions. We got Beastie Bits, but of course, before we can get to those, we have to mention the last sponsor this week, which is going to be Tarsnap. Website for that is tarsnap.com/BSDNow. You want to go get signed up and start doing your backups right away. First of all, if you're not doing any kind of backups, shame on you. If you're doing a unsecure backup, well, we'll give you some points for at least effort, but you really should be doing a secure encrypted backup the way Tarsnap does it. So you need to go check out that site right away. Don't take my word for it. Go look at the site, look at the details. Heck, review the source code if you like. It's all there.
That's the big difference.
You can even compile it yourself so you know you're running exactly what you claim to be running. And because you're doing your backups in an encrypted, secure manner, only you have access to it, even if the bits are locked away in cold storage somewhere. I mean, once it's in the cloud, you never know where it ends up.
Yeah.
But the good news is with it being encrypted, you don't have to worry about that. Shred the key, and your data is effectively gone. So definitely get in touch with Tarsnap today. Sign up your account and put a few bucks in there. You'll be shocked how cheap it is when they measure pico dollars per byte month. I mean, it's pretty darn inexpensive, especially if you're doing data that doesn't change a lot. So it's only sending the diff. But definitely get in touch with them and get signed up today. So anything you want to put on there, Allan?
No, it's just I've been using it for, I guess, a year and a half now, or almost a year and 3/4, and it's been very, very nice.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Well, definitely get in touch. And if you have some Tarsnap success story or how it saved your bacon, we like to hear those too. So you'll have to let us know. Of course, we'll give you the contact info at the end of the show. So stick around. Okay, so over to Beastie Bits. We only have a couple this week. We'll talk about some more next week. But first up, it looks like the ACPIA-CA, which is the ACPI component architecture. Man, these long acronyms, man. Every week they get a little longer. But anyway, the coding language AML is now in Dragonfly BSD. So do you have anything you want to add on that one, Allan?
No, and just hopefully that will make it easier to have new stuff.
Definitely. Okay, and then we have an oldie but a goodie, the release announcement for 4.3 BSD Tahoe from 1988. Dang, man, I was 8 years old then. That's
Yeah,
sure
I
that
was
makes some of you
4,
guys out
so
there feel old. Sorry. But it is neat to see here. They have the phone number listed and everything right on the release announcement. Who does that nowadays? You think Glenn's out there putting his phone number on the release announcement for free?
I'm
for
so
FreeBSD?
that's it. I'm so getting an 800 number that forwards to Glenn.
That's
we can
right.
hide his real
It
phone
was
number.
a simpler time back then.
But yeah, what's interesting is Mike Carls has actually recently come back to FreeBSD and is being mentored by George Neville Neal and is getting his commit bit. It's quite interesting. It's like, I bet if you asked him in 1988, he didn't think he would still be working on it in 2016, and he didn't think he would have to be have his commits have to be approved by somebody else.
That's right. That's right. I'm half tempted to call this number and see where it goes, but yeah, we'll do that later. But anyway, that's still pretty neat to see. 4.3 BSD Tahoe. And of course,
distributed on tapes for the VAX and the Tahoe processor.
I'm just looking at the changelog. Some of the major new features include a TCP and IP code that's the same as recently made available via ARPANET and Usenet. Several new algorithms. Let's see, dynamic window size selection algorithms. A round-trip timing algorithm. Interesting.
Yeah.
File system has been generalized to remove the limits on the maximum number of inodes per cylinder group, cylinder per cylinders group, and number of distinguished rotational positions. Man, that's something I don't mess about doing old FreeBSD installations where it asks you the heads and similar stuff. Progress is a good thing in this case.
Yeah.
Let's see. Kernel and file system utilities operate normally now in both new and old format file systems. Old kernels treat the new file systems as read-only. Man, there's just this is a blast from the past. Again, I was very little at this time, so this even predates me, but it's just neat to see. There's a time zone implementation that's been added to the system, the Olsen-Harris ELZ. I wonder if that's still the same one we use today. That would be interesting.
The interesting thing is that
bits of that code live.
We've started the process of identifying the code in the 4.3 BSD distribution that is not derived from AT&T code. The copyright in this code has been changed to indicate that it may be freely distributed if the copyright notice is retained and that due credit for its origin is given to the Regents of the University of California. Over 1,000 files have been identified in this distribution.
Very nice, very nice. Well, again, check it out. That's if you've got to do a college project or something about the history of Unix or whatever, you may want to start here. There's some gold stuff. Some gold you could dig here for sure.
Yep. And then we have one more news story. PEFs, if you remember from quite a while ago, it's the personal encrypted file system. What makes this different than most other types of setup is that it actually sits on top of your regular file system. So, for example, you can have your encryption on top of ZFS, so you can still do snapshots and everything.
And you can replicate it, and it's technically encrypted.
Yes, it stays encrypted across, in particular. Yep. So, basically what this does is, on your actual file system, your file names are just base64 encoded gibberish, and then the content is also encrypted. And then when you mount PEFs over top of it, it provides a virtual file system that decrypts that if you have the right key, and can do stuff like decrypt your home directory only when you're logged in, and when you log out, it re-encrypts it. Yeah. Whereas something like Geli, as long as the machine is on, all your data is available to be read. And so it gives you a little bit more control over things as well. The big one is that this new release includes shared vnode locking that greatly improves performance, refactored the internal directory cache subsystem, which greatly improves performance, and new configuration options per file system hash table instead of a global one, which increases performance. And also fixed the race condition in the kernel's FPU context allocation to avoid problems, and a bunch of other stuff. So it's nice to see PEFs still being updated, and I know the author is working on a PEFs 2.0, and
which I'll be curious to see what kind of stuff lands into. What surprises do you have in store for us? But this is still really cool. I need to play with that again. I always loved having the PAM module. Like, that just made so much sense to me, and being able to say, okay, my home directory is now encrypted, so when I do my backup, it stays encrypted, and I don't have to trust that. In this case, a FreeNAS box I was backing up to was. Nobody else could look at my data on there. So, very good stuff. Very good stuff. So, give that a shot. It's in the port tree. So, if you're curious to play with it, there's instructions, lots of tutorials around the net on how to turn that on and enable it. It's actually not that bad. Okay.
Time for some
let's
questions.
move on to
Time for some questions.
Yes, time for some questions and feedback from you folks out in the audience. So first up, we have Mike, and I know you answered this already in email, Allan, but I thought it was good to pass the knowledge along to everyone else.
A bunch of people will probably have the same question.
Says, hey guys, I'm wondering if you can tell me why a base jail would have the same uptime as its host. I have a jail that was started about 20 minutes ago and returns the same uptime as the host system. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, so the difference there is jails are not VMs where you're actually starting it from scratch. In particular, the way jails work is you're sharing the kernel that's running on the host and then just having a separate userland and basically your namespace and separated so everything in the jail can't see anything outside the jail. But because it's the same kernel, it reports the same version and it reports the same uptime and other things like that because the kernel has been running for more than 20 minutes. If you really need to see the uptime of the jail, as part of starting the jail, there's the init process. So if you look for the init process inside the jail, if you look at that with like PS, you'll be able to see the date when it started and calculate the uptime.
I almost wonder if that's something that could be fixed or should be, like having a jail-specific uptime.
Yeah, I suppose you could have like
I'm in a jail. Let me figure that out for you automatically.
I wonder if in the jail context setting where it actually stores the date when the jail started, because then the uptime command could just figure out that it's in a jail and then calculate the diff or something.
Yeah, so I'll print this different time versus the
that
host.
would be interesting.
I don't know.
But yes, this can also cause confusion when if you say build a jail where the world inside the jail is actually say FreeBSD 9.3, but your host system is running 10.3, then when you run uname in the jail, it'll say that it's 9.3 because that's what kernel you're running. Luckily, in newer versions of FreeBSD, there's the capital U and capital K flags for uname, which return the ABI version of the kernel, K for kernel and U for user space, and allows you to actually see if they're different because it allows you to actually detect what version of the world you have installed, which is handy. I think in newer versions of FreeBSD, there's actually a periodic job that runs, and included in those that daily email you get is a warning that if your user space doesn't match your kernel, which can happen when you say have done FreeBSD update, installed the new kernel, rebooted, but have not installed the new userland yet. I know a couple of people got bit between FreeBSD 9.1 and 9.2, I think it was, by upgrading their kernel and not their userland, and then when they went to go from 9.2 to 9.3, they did the same thing and ended up not having the same SSH didn't work because they were missing some other library because FreeBSD update thought it was updating from 9.2 to 9.3, but it was actually updating from 9.1 to 9.3 because the user hadn't finished.
Okay, well, definitely good stuff here. So let's move on to Greg, who says, hi, Allan and Chris. So this might be a cool PF Sense box. And then he links us to an article talking about an open networking kit that's been inspired by a Raspberry Pi. I don't know if you can bring up the link there, Allan. But basically, it looks like he claims it starts at about $70. He said it seems to be closer to 90, but it's a dual-core 1.3 to 1.6 gigahertz Armada-based A388-based CPU. Lots of connectivity, SFP, dual gig E, M2, USB 3.0, cellular, MPCIe, microbus, etc. Supports Linux 3.x, OpenWRT, and I'm not sure what that last one is. Yocto? Or
yeah, I have no idea what that is.
I've seen that one before. But
yeah, when I saw this,
yes, we'd have to see if someone can run that.
Because I know that FreeBSD already runs on a bunch of the Marvel Armada's SoCs, so I think that's one of the supported ones, or if not, it wouldn't be that much work to make it supported. And then, with the 2 gig ports and the optional optical, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it definitely looks pretty cool. Size-wise, it looks maybe a little wider than a Raspberry Pi, if I had to guess, just looking at the size of the ports.
Yeah, well, like with the, I think it's a bit, thicker because of the SFE and so on, but yeah.
Still, pretty neat. Well, thanks for sharing, Greg. We appreciate that. Yeah, that would be neat to see somebody get that running, turn that into a little router. Okay, so next up is Christoph writes in about the IPv6 fragmentation we discussed
this
a while back.
Christoph.
Give us the overview.
This is Christoph Provost, who's basically the de facto maintainer of PF and FreeBSD, and he has a response to the question we answered a couple of weeks ago on the big int trouble episode. And so this is what we were hoping for. Somebody from the community who knows what they're talking about to answer this guy's question.
That's right.
He says, fragmentation exists in both IPv4 and IPv6. The main difference between V4 and V6 fragmentation is that in V4, intermediate routers will fragment packets that are too big. In V6, they'll just drop them and send an ICMP packet too big error back, and the host is expected to resend it smaller. Yeah, so in other words, all of the sending hosts can fragment in V6, while in V4, all the routers along the path can do the fragmenting. This doesn't make a huge difference for the sending or receiving hosts, but it complicates the implication for firewalls. What Joe's doing now, presumably something like this, which is pass in INET6 proto IPv6-frags, that will let any packet with a fragment header through the firewall, essentially resulting... it makes the firewall useless because you can basically fragment the packet in such a way that it won't match the other firewall rules. Whereas normally if you reassemble the whole packet, then it would match some firewall rule that might be blocked. This is if, for example, he'd wanted to forbid any TCP packet on port 666, that would be trivially circumvented by sending the TCP packet in two fragmented packets. PF would be unable to figure out the TCP port, but the fragment rule would let them through anyway. What he wants to do instead is scrub in all fragment reassemble. This tells PF to reassemble the packet before filtering it, so that it'll
Makes sense.
match the rules. This means that the rules will apply to the reassembled packet. In the previous example, that'd mean that PF would reassemble the packet first, then it'd be able to look at the TCP and make the decision based on that, and that's supported in FreeBSD 10.3 and 11. That code.
Is there any reason not to have that on? Like, it just seems like something you'd probably always want on if you're using IPv6.
I'm not sure, but it didn't exist before 10.3.
Sure.
As for his question about avoiding fragmentation, I have to admit that I'm not quite sure why he's even seeing it here. Usually TCP is clever enough to avoid the need for fragmentation in the first place by setting the size of the MTU to be the size of fragment payload is 1240 is suggestive because 1280 is the lowest allowed MTU in IPv6. There might be a configuration error somewhere, or you might not have enough information to say for sure. But he's saying you can probably get rid of this fragmentation by forcing the TCP MMS, or maximum segment size, to be the same. And so he provides an example of how to actually set that in PF. Scrub INET6 max MSS 1240.
Nice. Okay, well, thanks, Christoph, for writing in on that. That was definitely a tricky one. Okay, so next up we have Ty writes in about updates and logs. It says, hello, long-time listener, and he said, I've asked a question or two before, both here and on the list that Allan's helped me with. He said, first of all, I wanted to plug IX Systems. I ordered a server for my house, and it was built and shipped really quickly. The sales guy I spoke to was really helpful in getting it what I wanted and customizing it just the way I wanted. Also, since I'm totally blind and can't read the manual, when I had a question as to why my server's fans sounded like a vacuum and wanted to power them down since they're sitting right next to me, the engineer read the manuals, described the beeps I might get, and also gave me step-by-step instructions on how to fix the fans in the BIOS so that I could get somebody with working eyeballs who might not know anything about BIOS config to help me. He said, I did have a few questions that I wanted to ask here because Allan's always talking about ordering new servers. He says, I presume he has a ton of them, and while I'm not getting that to my point, my number of servers is growing. He says, so what do you prefer for deploying multiple systems? He said, I really want to eventually skip the whole FreeBSD update when a new version comes out, say going from 10 to 11, deploy a new system on 11, and just swap over the IP on DigitalOcean. He said, I also want to be able to spin up and down servers as I like. How do you handle per system configuration with the deployments where the deploy on a web server versus a database might have a slightly different configuration?
Basically, I put these in jails, and then they each kind of have a recipe. And then I just have to say, put this one on that machine, and then it goes there. And I try to to avoid having any machine be a special snowflake and have some unique configuration. In general, my servers, the only thing that's really unique is its IP address and its host name. The IP address is usually assigned by the ISP, and the host name is derived from its location. So there's not much thinking involved there. And then it's just a matter of, my config management thing knows this is what a web server should look like, and this is what a database server should look like. And then it's just a matter of actually having the data.
Well, he also asked, how do you manage updates? In other words, if I have 10 servers, each having 5 jails, that's 50 package audit-fs I need to run. Do you do anything with that, Puppet or anything?
So we build our own package repo, and so we build first so we update so we have 2 versions of the port tree checked out, and then we basically build 2 repos for each version. One is the default, and one is what we call the head repo. And so a fraction of our servers run the head repo, and so we basically test package updates on a small number of our servers, and if after a while we decide that that's fine, then we roll that update out to all the servers. We have basically one machine. Our package builder machine does the package audit thing, so I only get the emails once instead of on every server. I just this way I know, all right, this package in the repo that all 100 servers use has this vulnerability, and I should fix it.
That makes sense.
For logs,
so the only state you have to track is to make sure they're all updated.
Yeah. And I use Puppet to take care of that. He asked about how I manage logs. Mostly we don't. For the web server logs, we have an application we wrote that basically parses those logs, takes out the information we need, which is mostly which website was it and how much data was transferred, and puts that into our billing system, because that's the only thing we care about. And then those logs get rotated away after 2 hours. We don't really keep web server logs very long at all, mostly because, when we built the system and we were getting, 20,000 requests per second across the network, there was no sense writing that all down. We just feed it into the billing system and then throw it away. And then for other logs, we maybe find interesting things every once in a while, but in general, the logs are kept on the server so that if something suggests we need to go look, we can go look and read it. But we don't centralize the logs very much. There's usually not that much in the logs that we care about.
Okay.
And then the daily, weekly, and monthly emails from the server, we turn those off now because we don't use them. We manage those other ways.
We need an don't care.
Yes.
Right? Or as I like to say for the FreeNAS team, we need a meh option.
Yes, meh.
Meh. Good to know. Okay, well, thanks, Ty. We appreciate you writing in. Okay, next up we have Benjamin, who says, hey, I thought that this commit message might interest you if it hasn't already been pointed out. He said, by the way, thanks for the show. And I don't know if you can show it on your screen.
I just pulled this in.
We have the
I found out about this when I saw the corresponding commit go into FreeBSD. So this is a commit from Matthew Dillon over at the Dragonfly BSD project. And the commit message says here, DMA makes an age-old mistake of not properly checking whether a file owned by a user is a symlink or not, a bug which the original mail.local also had. So he adds the option nofollow to disallow symlinks when opening the file. And it says, thanks to BSD Now, episode 152, made me dive DMA to check whether the mail.local bug we talked about existed in DMA, and in fact it did, and it is now fixed.
There we go. See, look at that. See, we highlight stuff here, people listen, and they fix crap.
Yeah, but I think it's the first time we've got called out specifically in a commit message.
We get credit for something.
Yes.
That's awesome. Well, great. Well, thanks, Matthew. We appreciate the shout out on that.
Yes, it's also just,
and of course,
encouraging to know that you actually watch the show. Thank you.
That's true. Now we got to get you on the show, right? Yes, we're going to track you down. You're going to come on one of these days. I want to hear about Hammer and Hammer 2 and all that. But anyway.
It doesn't have to be finished. Just talk about it.
Yeah, we just want to hear what's going on. But anyway, thanks, Benjamin, also for pointing that out. We appreciate that. So, of course, it's time to wrap up the show. So as we do, we're going to let you know you want to send everything to feedback@bsdnow.tv. That's the place we monitor. That's where we watch for comments. So send it all there, and we'll keep track of it. We may not answer right away. Sometimes we do. It happens, but usually we'll sit on things and wait and try and answer them on the show. So send that over and be patient. And usually in the next few weeks, you'll get an answer one way or another. But keep sending it there. Of course, stories. If you see stories floating around the net, send them. Like, for example, this commit, I hadn't seen the original commit in Dragonfly and knew that we had got a call out there. So that's pretty cool. So send stuff like that in so we can make sure to mention it on a future show as well. And of course, keep watching and listening. And we appreciate that an awful lot. And we'll look forward to another episode, same time next week.